Thanks for tuning in today. I'm going to show you how I built these white oak sofa tables. What's up, everybody? We're jumping right into this build. I fast forwarded through the boring milling process. If you want a video on that, I could do that completely separate, but I punched all the holes with my domino in, and now I'm just tapping in those tenons with a hammer. I'm using Titebond 2 in the patented mustard spreading technique. Lately, I've been using a brush to spread everything around because I always get it on my hands and then I can't use my phone and it's a mess. If anybody uses a glue roller or a glue brush that you like, let me know because I'm in need of something different than this. Also, what wood glue do you guys prefer? I like Titebond 2 for most projects. The nice thing about Titebond 2 is it's open time. It allows you plenty of time to get all your clamps in place. And as you can see from this picture, I use a ridiculous amount of clamps for this glue up. In fact, this is pretty much every single one of my bar or parallel clamps that I own. The old saying, you never have enough clamps, is true. I find a way to use all of these on a majority of my project. Also, make sure you orientate your clamps in every other format to apply even pressure on your tabletops. While we wait for that glue to dry, we're going to jump on over to the miter saw and get started on these legs. I got a brand new Diablo blade in my miter saw for this white oak, which is very tough to cut. And my legs are going to be cut right on this line I made. I set up my stop block for repeatability, and I need to cut 8 of these legs because I'm building 2 tables. And here they are in all their glory. I got everything cut. Look at how beautifully smooth that cut is from a brand new Diablo blade. I love using fresh blades when I'm cutting lumber, especially white oak like this here. I love the end grain of white oak as well. It gives me plenty of ideas for future projects using that end grain only. Now for the hard part. I am a terrible drawer. I'm the worst artist you'll ever see, so I have to use tools like straight edges, but I'm going to do a taper on the bottom of these legs. I think it's going to lighten up the look of them, and it's just going to look really cool. So I've got this line drawn on both sides, and I'm going to taper all 4 edges of these legs in hopes that it lightens the entire look of the table. The only problem is I have no idea how I'm going to cut through these. These legs are almost 4 inches thick, and I don't have a tool that is capable of making that massive of a cut. I'm going to have to set up some sort of jig with my table saw and then finish things by hand. And I ended up doing just that. I dug through all my old crappy jigs from the past, and I found this one here. I pulled it apart and modified it, put on a piece of plywood with my pin nailer, and on the opposite side of this leg, I'm going to place another piece of plywood, and that's going to sandwich this between those 2 planks, and I've got it lined up with the edge of my jig, so in theory, I should be able to rip that cut right on the line that I made here. Using that same trusty jig with a couple new stop blocks in place to cut the other angles on these legs, I've got it all set up, and those first cuts went great. I'm hoping the second ones go just as smoothly. I just have to rotate it 90 degrees and make another cut. With a little bit of elbow grease, I've got these legs looking great. I couldn't be more happy with how these turned out. Let's transition now from the legs to the center stretchers that I'm going to run across the bottom of these tables. I'm going to use half lap joinery for this because I love the look of the exposed end grain on that half lap joint. I like cutting longer stretchers on my miter saw. I just feel like it's safer and I have more support with the miter saw table versus running it on my table saw sled. You can set up your stop block on your miter saw to get a perfect cut every time. And here's your woodworking tip of the day. Put a block behind the piece that you're cutting so you can make a flat cut all the way through your half lap. With the curvature of the blade, if you don't have a scrap piece behind it, sometimes you'll see that cut actually curve upwards toward the end and you'll have a lot more work with your chisel. And my favorite part about half lap joinery is popping off these chips. Well, that's embarrassing. Cut me a little slack, that white oak is some tough stuff. Now let's move on to the next portion, which is my stretcher that attaches one leg to the other. on the edge of the table, so it's a shorter piece. I set up my table saw sled for this, and I'm way too lazy to flip over to my dado blade, so I just left the single blade in and I hogged that out. A nice clean round over to finish off these legs and give them an even slimmer and more finished look. I love using round over bits on table bases. And woodworking tip number 2 is using this painter's tape as often as you can. I like to pre-tape everything before my glue up because getting inside of these tight corners with sandpaper is a pain in the butt. Let that glue set up for about a half hour and then peel it off. Don't wait too long though, because once that glue fully cures and hardens, it's hard to get that tape out and you'll have to do a little cleanup work with the chisel. Spending a little extra time with that tape trick leaves you these nice clean miters and you don't have to worry about sanding any of this in the future. Alright, back to our tabletop, which is fully cured and dried now. I'm putting a radius on all these corners. I drew out a 2-inch radius. I'm going to hog out most of that material with my jigsaw. And then I actually just got this new jig from Rockler that allows you to use a flush trim bit and cut out these radius perfectly. Alright, I know what you're thinking, more tape in woodworking, but this double-sided carpet tape works so well for holding these jigs in place. I was skeptical at first, but you just peel off one side, slap it on your jig, and then press firmly on your lumber, and that jig is not going anywhere. Up next, it's time to fill knots and voids in the top of the tabletop. I'm using black Starbond CA glue. Use my promo code BUILT to get 15% off your order. This stuff works great. I use it on every project. Just a little bit of sanding and this tabletop is going to be so pretty. I start with 80 grit, then I switch to 100, 120, water pop it, and then finish with 150. A nice little touch that doesn't take much work is adding these threaded leg levelers to all of your furniture. It probably takes 5 to 10 minutes total to install these, and if you ever have to deal with an uneven floor or a wobbly table, you can just quickly adjust these and everything will sit perfectly flat. Now it's time for some good old Rubio Monocoat. I use Rubio Monocoat almost exclusively. They are not a sponsor. I just love this product. It has never failed me. Simply wipe it on and then buff it off until it's pretty much dry and let it sit for a few hours and you're good to go.
All right, I have the legs all finished. They're ready to get attached to the top. I wanted to show how I do this process. I got a 1-inch spade bit and a 1/2-inch spade bit. I start with the larger one. I recess this hole deep enough so that a washer and the head of my bolt can be recessed from the surface so they're not showing through. And I use a 1/2-inch to go all the way through from the bottom all the way through the top side, and that's where I'm going to feed that bolt through. And the 1/2-inch bit is twice as thick as my bolt is, which allows for seasonal movement in any direction. I also want to mention this Rockler jig works perfect for this so that your holes are perfectly 90 degrees down and they're not at weird angles, which makes it much easier to attach those bolts when it's delivery day.
And here you can see the tables with that pure natural finish on them. I really like how they turned out and the client is happy, and that's the most important thing. We've got them delivered into this beautiful home. It's literally a jaw-dropping home and they look perfect.